Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at Vicarious Vision's upcoming remake of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, and see how it compares to the original titles of the same name released way back in 1999 and 2000 respectively. For this demonstration, the latest remake will be played on the PC, with the settings pushed up to the highest preset at a native 4K resolution, while the original games are being played on a PlayStation 3, which should come close to emulating the look and feel of the original PlayStation releases. Though it shouldn't really make much of a difference anyway, as the focus for this video will be primarily on the most obvious visual changes that have been made, that are universal across all original releases of the game, and how the updated controls and features impact the quality of the overall experience. So, to kick this comparison off, let's check out how the quality of the character models has changed. Really, this should go without saying, but the remake's character models are quite literally decades ahead of the original character model designs for the pro skaters. Rather than just looking like creepy mannequins with some blurry sponsor-based clothing, these new skater models almost perfectly match the actual likeness of each of the skaters they represent. With Tony, you can see individual skin pores along his face, smaller appendages like his fingers that are now clearly separated, and even the blue of his eyes that you just couldn't make out before. They're not necessarily the best looking video game character models we've covered on this channel, but they're easily the best looking character models that we've seen in this particular series, and I think they do a great job of capturing the likeness of every pro skater. What's more, this remake even adds a bunch of new skaters to the roster, including a few secret skaters that you'll have to discover for yourself. Then there's the returning Tony Hawk 2 feature, Create a Skater, where you can build your very own skater to play as throughout the campaign and various other modes. This feature, while a great addition to the original games, has been significantly improved upon with this remake. I was surprised to find that the options previously were really limited. Sure, you could customize your weight, which sadly you can't do in the latest game, but you were also stuck choosing between 3 preset skin complexions, and then needed to cycle through a list of completely random head types, some with hair, some with hats and glasses, and no option to create a female custom character at all. In the remake, you can now directly select a specific facial type to begin working with, including female characters, and you can adjust things like hair, eyes, makeup, and clothing all separately. You can even unlock a ton of new cosmetic items using in-game currency, which I'll expand upon more in a bit. But regardless of which character you decide to roll with, you'll find that they look significantly better and more realistic now, with lots of unique animations and fluid motion that just wasn't possible before. And if you're not happy with the default appearance of any particular pro skater, there's also additional outfits you can unlock as well, just like in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Then of course, we have the environments. Here's where you'll no doubt notice the biggest improvements, as every single location has been lovingly recreated with the Unreal 4 engine, all with identical layouts to ensure that all of your favorite combo lines remain exactly the same. You'll even find a lot of your favorite levels have had a slight aesthetic tweak to them to help them stand out more. The hangar from Tony Hawk 2, for example, always looked like a sort of blue version of the original warehouse. So, to help make it stand on its own, Vicarious Visions has really polished up the look of it. There's also some giant posters of past Tony Hawk games hanging on the wall, rather than the original sponsorship banners from before. One of the most impressive redesigns, though, is the mall from Tony Hawk 1. The mall has been redesigned to appear more dilapidated, with lots of overgrown vegetation, rust, and broken glass everywhere, giving it a sort of apocalyptic look. At first, this seemed like an entirely new take, but upon closer examination of the original game's mall, this does appear to be exactly what Neversoft had intended, as there are a lot of big clearance sales and closed-off stores suggesting that the mall was on its last leg. This sort of upgrade really helps to sell the idea more, and I love all the great new details Vicarious Visions threw in, like the mannequins creepily watching from the upstairs balconies. And I also appreciate that they made it so the end zone teleports the player back to the start, rather than just instantly ending the session like it did before. One level change that I'm a little disappointed with is the Marseille skate park competition. Now, this isn't at all the fault of the developer. In fact, what they did makes perfect sense, because the actual Bowl of Marseille in France has been repainted to look exactly like this. But I'm personally going to miss that old graffiti-tagged look of this level, and I was really looking forward to seeing all that bright color in this latest re-release. But if we move past the more obvious cosmetic changes that have been made over the past 20 years, there's also a few interesting technical improvements that are worth mentioning with each environment as well. Thin objects like poles and lampposts, for example, are now fully rendered in 3D, rather than being simple sprites dropped into the world with some narrow collision applied. The same is true for all the vegetation like bushes and trees, that now fill the space on planters beautifully and give each area an amazing level of depth. The cars that drove around some of the environments and serve as annoying obstacles all make a return, but they now drift around corners instead of making unrealistic 90-degree turns like before. The projector screens, that in the original game would play actual skate videos and music videos based on the current song in the soundtrack, have been scaled back a bit, so you won't see them in places like Minneapolis anymore, but you will still see them in the skate park in Chicago, and the video feed now shows real-time footage of the players skating, rather than a low-res video file. Additionally, the draw distance for each environment has been expanded exponentially, allowing players to not just view the entire park from a distance, but also a much more convincing 3D backdrop of each location, including dense cities, coastlines, and forests. You'll even find a lot of great new details thrown in, like the helicopter that takes off from the hangar at the start of Tony Hawk 2, that will now fly around outside when you visit the secret area. Or these little camera drones that will buzz around you in Downhill Jam. There's secrets everywhere to discover, and it's definitely worth exploring every corner of the world, even corners that previously didn't have anything of value to show you. But before we start talking about new secrets and content, let's wrap up on the technical side by talking about the lighting and effects. The lighting in the latest game completely transforms the look and feel of every single environment, providing a remarkable new look for each skate park. The warehouse, for example, now has light pouring in through dirty window panes on the left side, and casts rich shadows on the ground, while also reflecting off of wet pools of water spread throughout. This, in combination with some great god rays, global illumination, and some subtle lens flare effects, helps to transform the warehouse into something that looks truly abandoned, and does a much better job of selling the idea that you're skating during the day inside an old building. Now, the light was technically pouring in through the windows in the old game too, but aside from those baked light rays high up in the ceiling, it's easy to think that this was happening at night in an abandoned structure. Some of the more impressive lighting effects have been applied to levels in Tony Hawk 2 though, especially School 2 and Venice Beach. These levels originally took place midday, with some really flat basic lighting, but are now soaked in an orange glow as they take place during the early evening. This choice really helps levels like School 2 stand apart from its predecessor from the first game, and I love the use of screen space reflections throughout to help enhance each scene further. Shadows have unsurprisingly also been improved a great deal, with skater shadows now projecting every small detail and featuring more natural diffused edges, as opposed to the rough-looking collection of ovals used to create the shadows before. Though, I do have to give credit to Neversoft for making some pretty convincing shadows back in 1999, considering most games around that time resorted to basic disc shapes instead. With the effects, there are a few things that are worth pointing out. When grinding on rails in the original game using the trucks, you should notice a few sparks flying out from under the board. This was fine as it was pretty subtle, though I do think Vicarious Visions has exaggerated this effect a bit too much, with a giant burst of sparks for every truck-based grind. But the much more disappointing change comes with the way characters slam, or as this game calls it, bail. In the original Tony Hawk games, bailing was always portrayed as gruesome and brutal, with a stupid amount of blood flying out after hitting the pavement, and even staining the ground in the later Underground games. But in order to appeal to a wider audience, including a new younger generation of fans, it does seem Vicarious Visions has made the decision to remove all blood from this Tony Hawk remake. Additionally, the bail animation has been updated to feature this odd rewind effect, likely to simulate an old VHS tape being rewound. I don't really mind the rewind effect, as it's a clever way to get the characters back on the board without having to run after it, especially considering the board exhibits its own physical properties after a bail. But I would have liked to see a toggle option for the blood effects, as it was part of the original game's edgy aesthetic. I also noticed a few of the original songs have been tweaked a bit, with inappropriate language being censored more heavily. It's a shame these decisions had to be made, as I do feel it impacts the general aesthetic of these two games. But newcomers to the series likely won't notice the changes at all. And that's mainly because these remakes completely nail the feel of the gameplay. Everything from the jumping, grinding, pulling off flip tricks and grabs feels incredibly smooth and responsive, though it may seem a bit overwhelming if the last time you played these games was 1999. So first, let's talk controls. This new remake borrows heavily from the control scheme utilized during the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube era of the series. with near identical player physics and movement from titles like Tony Hawk's Underground. All the moves featured in both Tony Hawk 1 and 2 have returned, and have been meshed together, meaning you can do manuals around the warehouse, along with more complex grinds and slides like tail slides and nose slides that surprisingly aren't available in the first game. But there's also been a slew of new tricks that were introduced afterwards, like reverts to connect vert and manuals together, spine transfers, hip transfers, and acid drops to more smoothly transition between adjacent vert ramps, trick extensions, allowing you to do Rodney Mullen-style flatland tricks, and double tap tricks, which basically doubles the available tricks players can perform. However, there are exceptions to this. Double tap grinds, for example, have not been added in, as a lot of the double tap grinds from the later games were original special tricks, and have been turned back into special tricks for the remake. Additionally, the spacewalk manual extension, which is the only trick that can help you get out of a manual stall, is not in this game, and I really would like to see it added in a future update if possible. But even without those tricks, this Tony Hawk remake still feels much better to play thanks to the changes that have been made to things like grinding, the removal of the obnoxious big drop mechanic, and the amount of control players have when going airborne. I think the best way to describe it is a combination of Tony Hawk's Underground's polished control scheme with the original levels and careers of Tony Hawk 1 and 2. And if you want an even more in-depth explanation of what I mean by this, I created a full breakdown of the controls and gameplay mechanics that I've linked below. Though it is worth mentioning that the pivot bug I mentioned there, where the balance meter wouldn't properly reverse direction after doing a manual pivot, has been addressed in this final version of the game. Now, let's talk available features. The demo, of course, was pretty limited, with only a single 2-minute session of the warehouse available to play. But now that I've had a chance to sit down and play through the entire game, we can finally take a deep dive into what else is being offered here. First, there's Skate Tours. This is the core of the gameplay experience, where you can play through either Tony Hawk 1 or 2 in their entirety with every single goal being preserved, along with a bunch of extra goals to help balance out the much shorter career in the first game. Goals include earning high scores, achieving a big combo score, collecting letters and other items, performing specific stunts, and of course, finding the secret tape. There's also a few heat-based competitions thrown in, that pit you against a panel of judges and other pro skaters. Completing goals and earning competition medals will unlock additional levels to play, and earning a medal in the final competition will complete that game. However, the end game is handled a lot differently this time around. Instead of needing to do all the goals for each individual skater, you're only required to play through the game once with any skater you want. You can even change skaters halfway through and continue where you left off. The one thing that doesn't carry over between skaters though are the stat points, that replace the extra point icons and cash icons in both games, and must be collected and used to improve each skater's skating abilities. This means that once you finish the game, you then have to replay each level and pick up the same floating stat icons for each individual skater to max them out. It's a bit tedious, but not nearly as bad as before, where you were stuck completing each and every goal for every skater in the game just to unlock the secret stages and characters. I imagine purists will be against this change, though I personally don't mind it as much, and I love how they added a new speedrun mode that lets you run through every level with all of its goals as fast as possible and compare your times to other players through an online leaderboard. It's a nice touch and one that will no doubt get incredibly competitive in no time. Then of course, we have to talk about the multiplayer component. First off, yes, the classic split screen option is available right out of the gate, even for PC players, and it works perfectly. The maps are even their full size now, as opposed to the original classic games where split screen would limit both players to a dumbed down version of each level instead. This means dynamic objects and destruction are available in 2-player mode, and that annoying golf cart driver at the school is still out for blood. All of the classic multiplayer modes return, like Trick Attack, Graffiti, Slap, and Horse, though the horse sound effect that played after losing has been removed. Along with this old school split screen mode, the Tony Hawk Remake also features a full online multiplayer component, with 2 different playlists: casual free roaming, for players looking to just skate without pressure, and a competitive mode, built for those looking to prove their worth against other skilled players. Like most online video games today, Tony Hawk 1 and 2 now features a player profile ranking system that will increase for completing any of the long list of challenges. The challenges are quite possibly one of the biggest new features to the game. There's challenges for everything, including completing the game, earning gold in all the competitions, finding the gaps, and even skater-specific challenges that help to make up for the removal of the tedious career replay grind. This will no doubt occupy a lot of players' time, as they try and run through each and every challenge to unlock a ton of great new vanity items to customize their characters and profile. The customization screen is just as extensive as you'd expect. You can select from a huge selection of decks now, most of which are real deck graphics, along with some special exclusive decks that unlock for completing more difficult sets of challenges. This also extends to other items as well, like grip tape, wheels, trucks, clothing, and profile icons to help show off even more. This system doesn't appear to feature any form of microtransactions currently, though it does seem like it's tailor-made for it, especially with the rarity of certain items being denoted by background colors. We'll just have to wait and see what Vicarious Visions has planned for this game's future content. Though, if charging for a few optional cosmetics means they'll be able to justify releasing a free Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 update, I can't say I'd be too against it, especially considering how much cosmetic content is already bundled with the game. And it's worth noting again that even if they didn't offer any more content to the game, it still far exceeds the amount of content offered in those original 2 Neversoft games. Next up, let's talk about the Park Editor. The Park Editor has undergone a number of revisions over the course of the series' lifetime, and ultimately stopped being featured after American Wasteland, at least not in the same capacity. But this version of the Create a Park mode seems to be one of the more interesting takes on the feature so far. Not only can you place a lot of classic pieces down like half-pipes, bowls, rails, and decoration, but there's also new ramps that can be custom built with more flexible properties. You can, for example, make a snake run without being restricted to a grid system. However, I do feel that this editor is still missing a lot of content. Sure, you can purchase more items using in-game currency on the main menu, but even with those few vanity props, a lot of the functionality from the past games, like the ability to create goals or adjust environmental settings like the time of day, are just not available. I really would love to see this mode, especially on PC, become more open to PC modders, and let them build anything they want with already available assets used throughout the game, or even import their own custom assets if possible. Then of course we have the soundtrack, an aspect that has become a major part of the Tony Hawk series' identity. Now, the elephant in the room here is that yes, there are a few missing songs, but a lot fewer tracks are missing than what was previously indicated. After compiling a list from the original game and looking through the available soundtrack, there's only 3 songs missing from the list, including Committed by Unsane, which was featured in the first game, B-Boy Document 99 by The High and Mighty, and Out With The Old by Alley Life, both of which were featured in Tony Hawk 2. I think of these 3 songs, the latter 2 I'll most definitely miss being in the playlist. Though Vicarious Visions did secure the license to a bunch of new songs for this remake to help update the list a little bit more. For me personally, it's hard to really care about these new tracks, as the old soundtrack is just nostalgic gold. But I do like some of the additions, like Shame in the End by Sublime. And if you want to adjust this set list, they've included a great tool to filter certain songs and disable anything you don't like. Finally, let's listen to a brief sound comparison. Which game's audio design do you prefer? And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 is a fantastic reimagining of these 2 classic experiences. Sure, the blood has been removed, the controls have been updated, and there's a trio of songs that didn't make the cut. But this really does feel like the creators actually cared about the source material, and wanted to make sure that the feel of the skating was done just right to appeal to both longtime fans and newcomers alike. My only suggestions at this point would be to add in a few more key moves like double tap grinds and the spacewalk, allow modders to create ambitious new environments to enjoy, and if possible, maybe reintroduce a form of photo mode, especially considering these new releases seem to have scrapped the original replay mode from before. I also would love to see Vicarious Visions continue to build on what they've managed to accomplish here, with the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 campaign being the obvious next step, and if possible, full remakes of Tony Hawk's 4 and Underground. But until then, what do you guys think? Are you impressed with the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater remake? What features would you like to see added in? Let me know in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.